Hey everybody, I'm Vincent Mentz, founder of Three Nails Information Security. Today I have invited Elliot Franklin, who's a Chief Information Security Officer in the Nashville area, integral part in the Nashville, Tennessee community, and we're here introducing him and wanting to hear a bit about his experience and hear some of his expertise. So Elliot, will you just give us a little bit of background on yourself and sort of your experiences?
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm super excited to be here and to share. I've been in the information security space for a little over 20 years. Got my start in working in the help desk, and so I have a kind of a special place for the help desk and promoting up workers from that, kind of getting a holistic view of an entire company. But I'm a born and raised Texan, moved to the Nashville area about 6 years ago. And, both my parents were school teachers and were a huge influence in terms of always giving back to the community. And so they really instilled that in me and wanting to always try to leave a place better than you find it and to give back. And so I've really tried to take that to heart. I love teaching courses in terms of the parent teacher associations, churches, other places on keeping your kids safe on the internet and your family, protecting your family on the internet, and then be involved as possible with the local security community, whether that's the Information System Security Association, the ISSA, or ISACA, InfraGard, just anywhere that I can get plugged in and involved and kind of giving back. I've had some key folks that have mentored me and helped me be successful. And so just now, finally, after 20 years, I'm now starting to finally make the time to try to give back and mentor some folks. And it does take some work, but it's so helpful. So that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Well, chatting offline with you, I think one thing that you emphasized and kind of stuck with me is, um, I guess if I were to put it in quotes, is getting back to the basics and surrounding cybersecurity. I think that really struck me about what some of the fundamentals and basic things every organization and company should do to sort of begin or at least do really well before they start enhancing or augmenting or building upon their networks and things like that. Can you share a little bit about what you think are the foundations of cybersecurity in organizations?
Yeah, and trust me, the only reason that I've been able to, I think, that I have this kind of foundation is because I made a lot of those mistakes. So coming in and in some of my first security roles, which whether it's just even an analyst or whether I was a team lead or eventually a security director, is not yes, you've got to pay attention, you've got to know what's going on in the world, you've got to have your podcast or your news sources to kind of see what some of the emerging threats are. But at the same time, I think we get caught off guard to go into these conferences and other things and seeing all these phenomenally fancy technologies that can solve all the world's problems, and they can't. And so I think a lot of security leaders get real caught up in buying all these different tools and putting them in place and only maybe implementing them not even half of what capabilities they have, maybe a fourth, shelfware, just buying some things, turning them on and leaving them there and thinking they're going to work. And then when you're in an incident, you have the IR team come in and they're like, well, you didn't have this configured, you didn't have this set up, and this is why the bad guys got in. And so for me, it's, creating that, what is that framework that maybe you're in a certain regulatory environment where you have to follow PCI or HIPAA or one of the frameworks, but I love the NIST cybersecurity framework, the NIST CSF, because I think, and they just finally updated it after, say finally after 10 years, but it didn't need updating because it was really the 5 pillars covered everything and didn't really change. And now adding governance as the 6th pillar made perfect sense. And so if you do a self-assessment, if there's a lot of free NIST self-assessment frameworks out there that you can find, a spreadsheet that's got the controls, you can partner with some different folks across your company and answer those questions, 100 plus questions to kind of see where your gaps are, and then go create a roadmap from that of the highest priority, the most critical gaps first. And then, and only then do you say, okay, we've got these gaps. Let's go look for, is there, the whole people process technology. Do we have the people to solve those problems? Do we have the processes, which nobody likes, the written policies in place? And then only then, finally, the last thing is the technology. Because if you buy a tool and you don't have any of the foundations, the people, or the processes in place, that tool is going to fail. How many people have spent millions of dollars to put an IAM tool in or a DLP tool in, and it failed because they didn't have the people and the processes first to support it? I know I have. I've made those mistakes. And so now, if I gave any advice to someone, that's kind of where I would start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like what I'm also referring to is you kind of mentioned some of the security mechanisms that you can build into, I guess things that are already accessible to any organization that has, Windows or Linux networks, and fundamental things and practices like, ensuring specific security mechanisms are in place. Local admin password storage, things like that, changing randomizing passwords, just things that are practical. What types of those things? Because those are, I know you had a few for me that I thought were like, yeah, I mean, that's a great place to start. What types of things would you say are also practical fundamentals that organizations should implement?
No, you're right. So after you get that foundation in place or the framework you've selected there, and I've been in part of some sessions where we talk about, security on zero budget. And I've been in places where they literally brought me in and had zero budget. And so you can absolutely get started with that. Think about, the four areas, and this was put out back, I think in 1985 by the Australian Security Department. But it's so foundational, but yet none of us can get it right, or it still wouldn't be a thing. And that's patching your operating system and patching your applications. And that's not easy. Either of those are easy, neither of those are easy, but with Windows, there's of course built-in tools now. I mean, if nothing else, if you're in a smaller environment, just turning on auto updates, it used to be a problem that maybe you would get a blue screen if you didn't test your patches. That, outside of the CrowdStrike incident, which is a whole nother story, that hasn't happened in a very long time. Just auto accept your updates and let them run, unless you've got some really old legacy software, and that's a whole nother discussion. But turn on your automatic updates for your operating system. Turn on your automatic updates for your applications. That's going to solve a whole lot of that's going to really shrink your attack surface. Then remove admin rights from the local users. Again, there's always exceptions. There's always developers or certain departments that say they have to have admin rights for certain things. But if you can remove those local admin rights, and then the last one is application whitelisting. Again, if it were easy, everybody would be doing it. But I mean, look, even if you're just if you're a Microsoft shop, you've got Defender, even it can do application whitelisting now. Even if you're not buying a fancy, CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or one of those specific whitelisting tools. If you do those four things, that's going to reduce your attack surface again at least 85%. And so that leaves the other things, the fancy things, much smaller attack surface.
Why do you think a lot of companies tend to lean into the security tooling rather than leverage like free and accessible functionality and tooling that's built into Windows? And like to sort of piggyback and feed off what you're saying, when I'm conducting penetration tests, something that's very difficult to bypass and there's some information around it, but unless you're a very sophisticated attacker, sometimes things like protected processes and even leveraging like the protected users group in Active Directory, so you can't steal users' NTLM hashes and things like that. Why do you think companies don't emphasize leveraging or living off the land almost? Right. I do it all the time in pen tests. Like, why do you think companies don't typically go that route?
No, you're right. That's just like, PowerShell and other commands. Like, why aren't you limiting who can run those? Right. Because they are needed. They are needed to in an environment, typically to maintain the environment. But I think for me, a lot of that, there's two factors. One is, I'll say the marketing budgets of the security companies are astronomical, or they appear to be. And so they're going to tell you that it's 10 times easier, and it probably is. I mean, 10 times easier to just use their tool. That will do the same thing, but the GUI is much nicer. I mean, look, Microsoft, to me, and I'm not a Microsoft hater by any means. I know there's some folks that just bash them left and right. Their interfaces for certain things are not good. They're not easy. They're getting better, but their interfaces are sometimes you've got to use command line to get some of the basic functionality. but I still think it goes back to strategy and planning and education. If you've got, if you're doing a strategy session, if you bring in a third party, which I think is valuable, unless you've got some really strong internal security architects, but if you bring in a third party that can that maybe is Microsoft certified in that case, I can say, what are the tools and the things that we can do that we're already paying for? And let's map those to what gaps we just went through on that self-assessment we did before you go look at buying a new tool, because so many times we're buying tools that overlap in capacity, in capabilities, and maybe they overlap more than 50%. And so I have to ask myself, what am I paying for that overlap, and can I reduce it? And I always look, when I'm bringing in a tool, what tool can I take out? It's not always possible, but I always say, if I'm bringing in a tool, it's probably 3 or 4 years old. Is this new tool going to cover that and something else? But I think it goes back to educating and partnering with the company that can show me what are those built-in free or included tools within the Microsoft suite that I could take advantage of before buying another tool. Because I think a lot of us, myself included, we just don't know that. Microsoft changes licensing and tools so frequently and adds new features. Yeah. We don't know about it. And they don't really, in my knowledge, they don't really do the marketing because they don't have to, because you're already going to be a Microsoft shop. Everybody uses 365. And so I don't know that their team does as good of a job about doing those quarterly business reviews and saying, hey, here's the new features we have. Have you turned this on? Do you know you're already paying for this? Yeah, I think that also goes on us. We could demand that. Demand's a strong word, but we could ask our partner, our reseller, hey, I want to have these QBRs for Microsoft. I'm paying $500,000 a month in licensing or something. And so let's make sure I get the use out of that. So it goes both ways, but I think it's education. I don't know about even the stuff you just mentioned. Some of those things I didn't know Microsoft had as an option. And so I think a lot of that would go to education.
Honest and completely fair answer. Yeah. Appreciate that. I think one thing that, I guess the impression you left on me when we had talked offline was just that, just fundamentals. And we started with that and practical. Why do you feel like, I kind of feel like you should elaborate a little bit more on why companies should focus on practical frameworks rather than just kind of following and buying into the latest trends that people are seeing on Twitter or seeing on, on these marketing campaigns. Like it seems like there's a new cybersecurity tool every corner you turn, and there really is. And, they might be good, they might not, but yeah, I guess kind of leave it there.
Yeah. So again, if you go back to the identify, detect, protect, respond, recover, and then of course govern is over all 5 of those. But if you look in each of those pillars of the NIST cybersecurity framework, I think it goes back to, what are my biggest risks in those areas? Identify, can I see all of my attack surface? Can I see all my users? I think it's easy to get overwhelmed and sometimes stressed or threatened even by some of your leadership team. Sometimes your go-to-market, maybe you're in a retail space or something where you've got to get things pushed out quickly. And so you're focused on this project, and then you're focused on this project and this new deliverable. And so you don't maybe have the time or the ability to focus just on what is my cyber strategy, and then how can I help the business, and how can I do it efficiently for the lowest cost possible. And so that's, to me, that's been a challenge in terms of just the blinky lights. Always, AI. Now I need to be focusing on AI security. Well, you shouldn't put your head in the sand. That's for sure. There are new risks with AI. But they always point back to the basics. Again, what is your identity system? Do you have least privilege? Do you have multi-factor with number matching? Because AI is still going to try to get past all of those things. Passwordless, tokens. Are you focusing on the basics before you hear all these buzzwords of insider threat, insider risks, all these different, whatever new marketing terms that come up from the security vendors, zero trust, SASE, all these things. They all still point back to the basics. And so you look at the zero trust. Well, that goes back to when we talked about, are you removing the admin rights? Are you doing least privilege so that when somebody does get in, they can only get to what they have access to? Are you doing the user access reviews? Those are the things that they're not sexy. Nobody likes to do that. Some of that, it's paperwork. But that's what, at the end of the day, when somebody gets in, fishes a user, gets them to click on the multi-factor button, and then starts elevating their privileges inside the environment, those basics should help catch that quicker. The bad guys are going to get in if they want to get in, but the goal is, can we limit the attack surface and catch them as quickly as possible? And if you're focused on all these other things, you're not going to have the time to dedicate to that strategy, that basic strategy.
Love that. Yeah. I just think one thing that is a super strong impression that you give off is just this fundamental, real like good cybersecurity isn't sexy. It's
Mm-mm.
just not, you know. Uh
It's like the TV show, right? I mean, whether it's Mr. Robot or one of these, where I mean, the CSI, cyber, where folks, they see the hacking and everything, and then they're like, oh, we can solve it in 30 minutes, or because of course it's a TV show, but you're right, and some people want to get in. I've had interviews with candidates. I ask them what intrigues them the most or what makes them the most excited about wanting to join my team or wanting to work in cyber. And they're just like, oh, red teaming. I want to test pen testing and breaking in.
Right.
And that's certainly important. But I think the whole thing that's used over and over in terms of when people are looking to counterfeit, to be able to detect a counterfeit dollar, they don't look at the fake ones, they look at the real ones, right? Mm-hmm. And so that they can tell the difference. And that's the same thing with the pen tester. I think you've got to get inside first. You've got to understand the patching. You've got to understand network stacks and everything before you can go do the fun stuff of, OpenVOS or whatever you do your testing, your vulnerability scanning with, a Nessus or whatever you're going to use. But yeah, I mean, look, the first time that I was exposed to cyber was in high school when I both my parents school teachers. And so I was up at the school all hours of the day and night because they were grading homework, lesson plans, whatever. And so I was in the library and I, hacked our grading system there, which there was no cloud back then. It was all on-prem. And so when you're sitting there and you're looking at a machine and you're looking at an application and you're looking at a program and you're bored to tears and you find a hole in it, that's what really kind of gave me some of the foundations. I'm sitting there every night, hour up on end, just playing on the computer in the library. And then I see some application. I don't even know what coding is. I don't know what programming is. And you see something that looks out of the ordinary and you exploit it. And I'm like, holy cow, I don't think I'm supposed to be in here seeing all this now. And immediately letting my dad know, who happened to be the principal. I'm like, I don't think I should be in here. And he contacted the company that was maintaining it. And then I had a job for the next 4 years working for that company, going around to all the school districts and securing their systems. But I think that you've got to have that problem solving puzzle mindset first. To know the basics, which is why I love someone from the help desk, because you get to see all that before you just come in and just want to be the hero.
Yes. That's actually a perfect segue into the next question I wanted to talk about. We had some discussion surrounding, the ideal candidate to bring into your team and whether they're kind of discovering that if they're financially motivated, which, yes, super easy to be in cybersecurity, right? A lot of dollar signs there, but having that motivation, that self-driving motivation to learn, eagerness to learn. Help desk is, a great place for individuals who are wanting to expand and like go up the chain, the ladder. And so, tell us a little bit about like what type of individuals you think sort of fit your team, maybe specifically, and any industry, any organization's team the best. What kind of individual, what would their profile be?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's evolved over the last I don't know 10 years or so. When I've certainly hired, fired multiple folks. I've been laid off. I've laid off folks. I mean, so I've been on all sides of it. And from if I get a question frequently on LinkedIn and other places where folks say, hey, I want to get into cyber. Some are very seasoned, like looking for a second career. And some are certainly, college level students, college age students. And for me, it is that motivation. It's that curiosity. And it's hard to ask those questions in interviews, So we've had some bad picks, where I say bad picks, just wasn't the right fit for us, because someone would come in and you got to ask questions. I love it when people ask questions, but there's also got to be some self-motivation. Like, I want you to take advantage of ChatGPT. I want you to take advantage of, Google before you ask questions. And I want to see how creative you are in writing scripts. Are you going to write a Python script to automate this boring, mundane task you have at the help desk? Because you want to go to the next level. You want to do something different. And when you see something, somebody creates a ticket, somebody calls in and says, hey, I think my multi-factor was hacked. And I want to see that, what did you ask them? What kind of did you go through on the phone? The curiosity to try to help them and determine that before you pass it on. to me, that shows kind of again, you say the character and competence and commitment, the kind of the 3 C's when we're looking at folks. Again, what is your proactivity in that regard? Some folks, I find when you hire them, even after they've asked those questions, they still don't, they don't want to, they're not motivated. It doesn't seem they're motivated to want to do anything. And so I have to get on a call with them and say, okay, now have you tried this? Have you tried that? And again, there's that balance between coaching and mentoring, which is important. But then also, like, I know there's resources out there that you can go kind of find this, YouTube videos where you can kind of watch this. Have you done that first? Or are you just, if you're not motivated and you're just doing it for the wrong reason, I think at that point, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a feeling that you're a great person to go to ask questions, by the way. I think that
I hope so. I certainly hope so. And we can all learn. And I love when my team corrects me, because, I mean, how else do we grow? So my team thankfully knows that they can like call BS on me right away and say, hey, no, that's not right. And I'll be like, oh yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that. So, so I love, you're right. I love questions when people ask them, but you've got to have some motivation. If you don't have motivation, I can't help you. I can't help you in that area. And so that's frustrating to me sometimes.
Sure. One thing this kind of leads me to is just community aspect, that you're deeply involved in. I think it speaks to your character specifically to hear your involvement and representation in the Nashville area. Can you share a couple of the things you're sort of integrated in Nashville again, just for our audience?
Absolutely. And, this is, again, kudos to my parents for kind of instilling this. It was the same way in Texas. When I was in Texas, I was a part of, we started something called the Texas CISO Forum, where we got CISOs from all across Texas. I mean, it was no formal charter, membership, anything like that. We just met like once a month, and we would buy lunch for everybody, and different companies would host it. We would talk about what their security program was doing, and then the Information System Security Association, which is of course a global professional association. There's chapters, 250 something chapters across the globe, and so I've served on multiple boards for ISSA, whether it was in San Antonio or Dallas or now here in Middle Tennessee. And then there's a ton of these networking groups, like CISO networking groups, that are coming about, that are being sponsored by vendors, but they're coming in and sponsoring dinners as well. I mean, I kid with some folks, balancing family time, but there's literally, we could go to a free steak dinner every night here in Nashville with a different group that's sponsoring these, but it's, so you've got to balance that. But that networking, I mean, I've probably gotten at least half my jobs through that, because, those folks at dinner, I tell them, they might be my next boss. You never know. We're all peers. But the more important part is, we're friends now, and we're texting each other, and we're saying, hey, I have this problem. Have you seen this problem? Or have you tried this vendor? Or have you tried this reseller? We even created here in Nashville, we created an app, a free app that is by invitation only, but it's for, the CISO community, that has a listing of all these events, every single, event, every single conference that's local to the area, a link to register. And so we can kind of try to encourage folks to get out and be involved. And it's just, again, it's crucial for building up our community. We have such, we say there's this, such a this talent gap, if you will, in terms of cyber. And I'm not sure there is, but this can certainly help fill those roles if companies do need folks, and work with the recruiting companies as well. But, we know who's working at what company here, the culture of those companies. And so that's just, I think that's so invaluable in the community. And we know when somebody's got personal problems going on, if they're willing to share. And sometimes we don't want to talk about the icky, touchy-feely stuff, but, at the end of the day, we're all humans. We've got, families, we've got kids, we've got challenges going on. And so if you don't have anybody to talk to about that, cyber is pretty stressful. People say, there's a lot of emphasis around, like, on the suicide prevention months and those kind of things. We're like, hey, this is real. And there are some cyber folks that are so stressed by their companies. Their companies are putting undue burdens and stress on them, saying, if we get hacked, it's all your fault. And it's not. And so just, again, try to be there for folks and encourage them.
You participate in doing some RSA conference planning as well, right? Is that in Nashville specifically, or?
Yeah, I've had the privilege. It's probably been maybe 4 or 5 years that I've been on the RSA planning committee for the RSA Conference in San Francisco every year. And that's to my knowledge, it's the world's largest cybersecurity conference. We normally have about 50,000 people, although Black Hat and DEF CON may have that many as well now as also. But there's tracks. There's like 10 tracks at RSA, and so I've served on the governance risk compliance track, and so there's 3 of us that serve on each track, and you're reviewing, the hundreds of submissions. We get, at least 1,000 conference wide, but at least the ones that say they want to be on a GRC track, and we'll review, a couple hundred of those and pick 10 of those with a couple of alternates each year in order to present. We work through all the slides with the professional speaker coach and everything. And it's quite an experience. It's a lot of time. It's all volunteer, obviously, but it really, it's great, again, to give back and build that community as well. Because that conference, again, it's just a place to learn and grow and network. And we don't want to make it vendor salesy. We want the presentations to be hands-on, actionable. You've got to have a slide at the end that says, here's what I can take away in the next 6 months. And so I'd love to be involved with that.
Based on that, and based on sort of judging and scaling those presentations, what do you feel like your expert opinion, what do you feel like some of the shifts or trends in the cybersecurity industry will be in the next coming years? I mean, I feel like you get unique insight into that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question, and it's one that I think we all get asked quite a bit, kind of that crystal ball. And I've been wrong quite a few times on it. I'll tell you that. But it's, I'll say the sad part. A lot of the threats are the same. They have been the same for 20, 30 years. The entire time I've been in cyber, the threats have, certainly they've increased, and the attack surface has certainly increased because now everything's on the internet. We have all the Internet of Things. But and certainly, AI is a real thing. It's been around for a long time. It's just kind of been rebranded recently, but we've had AI for a long time. Certainly not maybe the generative AI, which is really the game changer now. But, I still go back to, in the next couple of years, I think the human element and the talent is going to be key, because regardless of the attacks increasing with AI, again, you've still got to have the security people, the team members to help you. And I think we've got to do a better job. Companies need to do a better job of kind of building up those team members. Universities need to do a better job. There's controversy going on with some of the security certification associations. I'll just kind of leave it at that. We were talking about that at my lunch today. Controversy there that some of them are just out to make money. There's some of these boot camps, like back 20 years ago when I got my CISSP, I went to a week-long boot camp and I loved it. I think it was very valuable. But I think some of those have gone to just a profit focus only and not as much a focus on actually the learning and the teaching, and that's unfortunate. And so I think companies and universities and these training schools are going to need to do a kind of a refocus, a realignment on, again, getting back to the basics, teaching, training off the computer, just theory, going through the books and manuals and kind of teaching you how to approach these different security issues when you get to them, and how to think strategically and ask the right questions. And so again, not sexy, not a technology that I think is going to solve the problems. I think we need to do a better job and a refocus back to the human element of bringing the communities together and doing a better job of joining these ISACs, the information sharing analysis centers, of threat sharing, but also just strategy sharing in terms of why reinvent a lot of these things. Why not work together? Because the bad guys have a very well orchestrated network of working together. So why can't we, even if we're in competing industry, why can't we do a better job of working together to build up our community?
Well said. Well said. As you were saying, reading books, I noticed your bookshelf. Have you read all of those books next to you?
I have not. I have not. I would tell you, my wife is certainly the one that buys the books. I've read quite a few of them, but certainly not all of them. I was challenged when I got my master's degree in 2020 to read a couple of great autobiographies and some different books on. And one of them was Get Out of IT, something like Get Out of IT While You Can. And I was like, what? Why would I read this? But it was more of the IT mindset. Like, as IT leaders, there's some folks that rise up to like an IT director or something, and then they can't go any higher, and the company ends up like terminating them. And they're like, well, but I was great. I started here in the help desk. I moved all the way up. But in their mind, they're focused on IT and not the business. So when somebody says, well, where do you work? Do you say I work in IT, or do you say I work for a financial services company that happens to have an IT department? Now, I get that no company can run without IT. I get that. No company can. But what does the company do to generate profit? IT rarely is the one that generates the profit. And so that was kind of the focus and the shift for me. And that kind of, it pushed me in a good way.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, Elliot, I feel like you'll probably be fairly easy for people to reach out to, which I would encourage any CISO or C-suite directive, or anybody of the sort, to reach out to Elliot. It's been nothing but a pleasure speaking with you, Elliot. Any closing thoughts, or any words of recommendation or quotes you'd like to give us before we end this podcast?
I'll just end with one thing that I'm still after 20 years not good at, but I would just encourage folks, again, much easier said than done, disconnect, work-life balance, because you're not going to get back time with your kids. So you're going to work your whole life. So try as much as possible, hire some good folks that can back you up. The world will go on without you. So take a vacation and try to disconnect. Again, I don't do it very well, but that's the advice I would give.
Thank you for that advice. Yes, love it. Well, thank you, Elliot, for joining today. It was a pleasure hearing, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. Really appreciate you.
All right, you bet.
Thanks, everybody.